What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find himself face to face with a host determined to tear him down on live television? What you're about to witness is one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime TV history, where professionalism went out the window and viewers got to see the ugly side of celebrity interviews. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment, because this story gets more intense with every passing minute. The studio lights were blazing as Javier Bardem settled into the familiar orange chair on the View set. The Academy Award-winning actor had appeared on countless talk shows throughout his career, promoting everything from intense dramas to blockbuster films. Today was supposed to be different. A casual conversation about his latest project, his humanitarian work, and maybe some light banter about his family life with Penelope Cruz. What he didn't expect was to become the target of one of the most aggressive interviews in the show's history. Joy Behar, sitting directly across from him, had that look in her eyes. The seasoned viewers of The View knew that look well. It was the same expression she wore when she was about to pounce on a political figure she disagreed with, or when she sensed weakness in a guest she could exploit for ratings. Today, for reasons that would become clear as the interview progressed, Javier Bardem was in her crosshairs. "So, Javier," Joy began, her voice carrying an edge that immediately put the other co-hosts on alert. "You've been very vocal about certain political issues lately. Some might say too vocal for someone who doesn't even live in this country full-time." The Spanish actor's eyebrows raised slightly, a polite smile still playing on his lips. "Well, Joy, I think as human beings, regardless of our nationality, we all have a responsibility to speak out about injustice when we see it." "Injustice?" Joy's voice rose a notch, and she leaned forward aggressively. "Is that what you call it when Americans disagree with your European perspective on how we should run our country?" The other co-hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the interview to take. Whoopi Goldberg shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Even the studio audience seemed to sense the sudden shift in energy. Javier maintained his composure, though those watching closely could see his jaw tighten slightly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Joy. I've never told Americans how to run their country. I've simply expressed concern about policies that affect people around the world, including my home country of Spain." "Oh, please," Joyce scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Spare me the diplomatic answer. You actors think because you can memorize lines and look pretty on camera, that somehow makes you experts on complex political issues. What makes you think anyone cares what you have to say about anything beyond entertainment?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Javier's publicist sitting in the green room was frantically trying to get the attention of the show's producers. This was supposed to be a soft interview about his upcoming film, not an ambush about his political views. "Joy, I think you're mischaracterizing what I've said," Javier replied, his Spanish accent becoming more pronounced as his composure began to crack. "I've been asked questions by journalists about current events, and I've answered honestly. I've never claimed to be an expert on anything other than my craft." "Your craft?" Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let's talk about your craft, then. Your latest movie. Another one of those pretentious foreign films that nobody actually watches. Tell me, Javier, do you ever make movies that regular people can actually understand and enjoy, or are you too good for that?" Now, even Whoopi was looking uncomfortable. "Joy, I think we should maybe focus on the positive aspects of Javier's work," she interjected diplomatically. But Joy was just getting started. "No, Whoopi. I think this is important. Here we have someone who comes on American television, criticizes our policies, makes movies that most Americans couldn't care less about, and then expects us to treat him like some sort of cultural ambassador. I'm curious about the disconnect." Javier's hands, which had been resting calmly on his lap, were now clenched. "Joy, with all due respect, I came here today to talk about a film that actually deals with very universal themes. Themes of family, love, and loss. I'm not sure why you're making this personal." "Personal?" Joy's voice was getting louder now. "What's personal is foreign celebrities thinking they can come to our country and lecture us about morality while they live in their ivory towers. What's personal is the hypocrisy of someone who benefits from American entertainment dollars while constantly criticizing American values." The audience was now murmuring audibly. Some were clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the interview, while others seemed to be enjoying the drama. Javier looked around the studio, perhaps wondering if this was some sort of elaborate joke or hidden camera show. "I have never criticized American values," he he said firmly, his voice rising for the first time. I have criticized specific policies, which is my right as a human being living on this planet. And I might add, many Americans share those same criticisms. Joy pounced on this immediately. So now you're speaking for Americans, too. That's rich. A Spanish actor who probably spends more time in Madrid than he does in Los Angeles thinks he knows what Americans are thinking. Joy, that's enough. Whoopi finally said with some authority. No, Whoopi. I think our viewers deserve to know where their entertainment dollars are going. When you buy a ticket to see one of Javier's movies, you're supporting someone who thinks Americans are too stupid to understand complex issues, too violent to solve problems peacefully, and too ignorant to see the world the way enlightened Europeans do. The color was draining from Javier's face. I have never said any of those things, Joy. You're putting words in my mouth that I have never spoken. Oh, so now I'm a liar, too. Joy's voice was reaching a crescendo. This is typical. Come on American television, insult our intelligence, criticize our country, and then when someone calls you out on it, suddenly we're the ones with the problem. At this point, the show's director was frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. The planned segments about Javier's humanitarian work and his upcoming projects had been completely derailed. What was supposed to be a 15-minute interview was turning into a 30-minute confrontation that was making everyone in the studio uncomfortable. Javier stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with an audible screech that echoed through the suddenly silent studio. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here. Joy, I came here in good faith to talk about my work, and you've turned this into some sort of personal attack. Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. Oh, so now when someone asks you tough questions, you can't handle it. That's the problem with you Hollywood types. You're used to everyone kissing your feet and telling you how wonderful you are. The studio audience was now completely silent. The kind of uncomfortable silence that happens when you witness something that feels too personal, too raw for public consumption. Javier remained standing, his hands trembling slightly with anger and disbelief. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was quickly becoming the most controversial interview in The View's history. I don't run away from tough questions, Joy, Javier said, his voice steady but filled with controlled fury. But what you're doing isn't journalism, it's character assassination. You've created a narrative about me that simply isn't true, and you're using your platform to spread it. Joy's eyes lit up with what could only be described as predatory satisfaction. Character assassination. That's a pretty strong accusation coming from someone who's made a career out of assassinating American characters in your films. Tell me, Javier, in how many of your movies are Americans portrayed as the villains? The other co-hosts were now looking anywhere but at their guest and colleague. Sarah Haynes was checking her notes obsessively, while Sunny Host appeared to be texting someone urgently under the table. Even the camera operators seemed uncomfortable, though they continued to do their jobs professionally. My films tell stories, Joy, Javier replied slowly, sitting back down but maintaining his rigid posture. They're fiction. They're meant to explore human nature, not promote political agendas. The fact that you can't tell the difference between an actor and the characters he plays says more about you than it does about me. This seemed to strike a nerve with Joy, who had built her entire career on blurring the lines between entertainment and political commentary. Oh, so now I'm stupid. First I'm a liar, now I'm stupid. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You elite Hollywood types think you're so much smarter than everyone else. I never called you stupid, Joy, Javier said firmly. But I am calling you unprofessional. This entire interview has been an ambush from the moment I sat down. You clearly had an agenda before I even walked through that door. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's face re-eamed, and for a moment she seemed genuinely speechless, but only for a moment. Unprofessional. She sputtered. I've been doing this job since before you ever set foot in Hollywood. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, and yes, plenty of actors who thought they were too good to answer real questions. The difference is most of them had the maturity to handle it. Whoopi finally found her voice again. Joy, I really think we need to redirect this conversation. Our viewers tuned in to hear about Javier's new film, not to watch a political debate. But Joy was beyond listening to her co-hosts now. No, Whoopi. This is important. Our viewers need to understand who they're supporting when they buy movie tickets. They need to know that their hard-earned money is going to people who look down on them, who think their opinions don't matter, who believe that being famous gives them the right to lecture the rest of us about how to live our lives. Javier's composure finally cracked completely. That is absolute nonsense, Joy. And you know it. I have never looked down on anyone. I grew up in a working-class family in Spain. My father was a welder. My mother cleaned houses. I understand what it means to work for a living, and I have never forgotten where I came from. Oh, please, Joy scoffed. The poor little boy from Spain routine. How convenient. Tell me, Javier, when was the last time you cleaned a house? When was the last time you worried about paying rent? When was the last time you lived like the people you claim to understand? The personal nature of the attack seemed to shock even Joy's biggest supporters in the studio. Several audience members were shaking their heads, while others looked genuinely embarrassed to be witnessing such a display. My success doesn't erase my past joy, Javier said quietly. But his voice carried across the studio clearly. And it doesn't disqualify me from having opinions about the world around me. What you're suggesting is that only poor people are allowed to care about social justice, which is absurd. Joy leaned forward again, sensing weakness. Social justice? Is that what you call it? When you criticize American foreign policy while living in luxury? Is that what you call it when you make movies that portray American soldiers as criminals and murderers? I have never made a film that portrays American soldiers as criminals, Javier shot back, his accent thickening with emotion. You're confusing me with other actors, other films. You're literally making things up to support your argument. Am I? Joy's voice dripped with sarcasm. Or are you just uncomfortable being called out for your anti-American bias? Maybe you've made so many films criticizing this country that you can't keep track of them all. The studio director was now frantically signaling for a commercial break, but Joy seemed oblivious to everything except her target. Javier looked around the studio as if searching for anyone who might inject some sanity into the proceedings. Joy, I need you to name one specific film where I portrayed American soldiers as criminals, he said, his voice rising again. Just one, because you're making serious accusations about my work and my character, and I have the right to defend myself. Joy paused for a moment, and for just an instant, it seemed like she might have realized she had gone too far. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. I don't need to provide you with a bibliography of your own work, Javier. The pattern is clear to anyone who's been paying attention. Anti-American themes, European superiority complexes, constant criticism of our policies and our people. The evidence speaks for itself. What evidence? Javier demanded, standing up again. You haven't presented any evidence. You've made accusations. You've put words in my mouth. You've attributed positions to me that I've never taken. This isn't an interview, Joy. It's a witch hunt. The word witch hunt seemed to trigger something in Joy, who suddenly became even more aggressive. A witch hunt? Really? That's your defense? Playing the victim? This is exactly what I expected from someone who spent his career playing the victim in movie after movie. I'm not playing anything, Joy, Javier replied, his voice now loud enough that the studio mics were picking up slight distortion. I'm trying to have a rational conversation with someone who seems determined to misrepresent everything I say. You've accused me of things I've never done, said things I've never said, and taken positions I've never taken. And when I try to correct the record, you accuse me of playing the victim. The other co-hosts were now looking at each other with expressions that clearly communicated their desire for this nightmare to end. The record, she laughed bitterly. The record is your movies, your interviews, your public statements. The record is you coming to America, taking our money, and then going back to Europe to criticize us to foreign press. That's the record, Javier. That is categorically false, Javier said, his voice now shaking with barely controlled anger. I have never criticized America. To foreign press. I have answered questions honestly when asked about global issues. There's a difference between being honest about problems and being anti-American, but apparently that distinction is lost on you. Joy stood up now too, matching his energy. Lost on me or convenient for you? It's easy to claim you're being misunderstood when you get caught saying things you wish you hadn't said. The confrontation had now reached a level that was clearly beyond what anyone in the studio had anticipated. The audience was shifting uncomfortably. The crew was exchanging worried glances, and the other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. But neither Joy nor Javier seemed ready to back down. With both host and guest now standing face to face across the coffee table, the studio had become a powder keg. The cameras continued rolling, capturing what would later be described as the most uncomfortable moment in daytime television history. Joy's face was flushed with anger and adrenaline. while Javier's usual calm demeanor had been completely shattered by the relentless assault on his character. "You know what, Joy?" Javier said, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. "I think I understand what this is really about. This isn't about my politics or my movies. This is about you needing to create drama for ratings. You've turned what should have been a professional interview into a personal attack because you know controversy sells." Joy's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like fury. "Don't you dare try to psychoanalyze me. You pretentious European snob. You think you can come on my show, insult my intelligence, and then lecture me about how to do my job. Your job?" Javier shot back, his composure completely gone. "Now, your job is supposed to be interviewing guests, not ambushing them with false accusations. Your job is supposed to be informing your audience, not spreading misinformation about people you disagree with politically." The studio audience was now audibly gasping at the exchange. Several people in the front rows were recording with their phones, despite strict policies against it. The energy in the room had shifted from uncomfortable to genuinely volatile. False accusations. Joy's voice was reaching levels that were causing feedback through the studio speakers. "Everything I've said about you is based on your own public statements. If you don't like how your words sound when they're repeated back to you, maybe you should think before you speak." "Quote me," Javier demanded, pointing his finger directly at Joy. "Right now. Quote one specific statement I've made that supports anything you've accused me of. Just one direct quote." Joy faltered for a moment, clearly not expecting to be put on the spot so directly, but instead of admitting she couldn't provide a specific quote, she pivoted to an even more personal attack. "I don't need to play your little games, Javier. Your attitude right now, your arrogance, your condescension, that tells our viewers everything they need to know about who you really are underneath all that Hollywood polish." "That my attitude?" Javier's voice cracked with disbelief. "My attitude is the result of sitting here for 20 minutes while you've systematically attacked my character, my career, my integrity, and my background. What did you expect? That I would just sit here and smile while you destroyed my reputation on national television?" Whoopi finally stood up, clearly having reached her breaking point. "Okay, both of you need to sit down right now. This has gone way too far." But Joy wasn't finished. "No, Whoopi. Don't protect him. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges these Hollywood elites, everyone rushes to their defense. Well, I'm not backing down." "Elite?" Javier's voice was incredulous. "You keep using that word. Do you know what elite means, Joy? It means I've worked my entire life to perfect my craft. It means I've studied. I've practiced. I've dedicated myself to something I'm passionate about. If that makes me elite, then I'm proud to be elite." The admissions seemed to energize Joy even further. There it is. Finally, some honesty. You are proud to be elite. You are proud to look down on regular people. You are proud to think you're better than the audience watching this show right now. "That is not what I said," Javier shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. "You're twisting my words again. Being good at something doesn't mean looking down on other people. Being successful doesn't mean thinking you're superior to others. The fact that you can't understand the difference says everything about your mindset. Not mine." Joy stepped closer to the coffee table, her voice dropping to an ominous whisper that somehow felt more threatening than her shouting. "My mindset. Let me tell you about my mindset, Javier. My mindset is protecting the American people from condescending foreign actors who think they can use our entertainment industry as a platform to spread their anti-American propaganda." The accusation was so outrageous that even some of Joy's usual supporters in the audience were shaking their heads. Javier stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to process what he had just heard. "Propaganda," he said quietly, almost to himself. Then, looking directly into the camera, he addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing something extraordinary. You are watching a television host fabricate an entire narrative about a guest in real time with no evidence, no facts, no basis in reality whatsoever." Joy immediately tried to regain control. "Don't you dare try to turn my audience against me. These people have been watching me for years. They know I tell the truth." "The truth?" Javier turned back to face her. "The truth is that you invited me here under false pretenses. The truth is that you've spent the last 30 minutes making accusations you can't support with evidence. The truth is that you've turned this show into your personal political platform, and you're using me as a prop in your performance." "Performance?" Joy's voice was reaching dangerous levels again. "This isn't a performance. This is journalism. This is holding celebrities accountable for their actions and their words. Journalism. Javier laughed. But there was no humor in it. Journalism requires facts, Joy. It requires evidence. It requires giving your subject a fair opportunity to respond to accusations. What you've done today is the opposite of journalism. The tension had now reached a level where even the camera operators were looking nervous. The show's producers were frantically trying to communicate with the control room, while security personnel had quietly moved closer to the set. "You know what, Javier?" Joy said, her voice suddenly becoming eerily calm. "I think we've learned everything we need to know about you today. You can't handle tough questions. You resort to personal attacks when challenged, and you have nothing but contempt for the American people who made your career possible." Javier stared at her in complete disbelief. "Personal attacks. You have spent this entire interview making personal attacks on me. You have questioned my integrity, my patriotism, my work ethic, my background, and my character. You have put words in my mouth and attributed positions to me that I've never held. And now you're accusing me of making personal attacks." "I'm stating facts," Joy replied coldly. "If you consider facts to be personal attacks, that says more about you than it does about me." "Facts." Javier's voice was barely controlled. "You haven't stated a single fact this entire interview. Not one verifiable, checkable, documentable fact. Everything you've said has been opinion, speculation, or outright fabrication." The standoff continued for several more seconds with both participants glaring at each other across the coffee table. The studio had fallen completely silent except for the hum of the cameras and the barely audible whispers of crew members trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Finally, Whoopi made the decision that probably saved the show from complete disaster. But even as the commercial break music began to play, Joy wasn't finished. "This isn't over, Javier. The American people deserve to know who you really are." Javier shook his head slowly, looking around the studio one last time before removing his microphone. "They just saw exactly who I really am, Joy. And more importantly, they saw exactly who you really are." With that, he walked off the set, still seething with anger and apparently oblivious to the fact that her behavior had just created one of the biggest scandals in talk show history. The aftermath of this interview would spark countless discussions about professionalism in media, the treatment of international guests on American television, and the responsibility that comes with having a platform as large as The View. But in that moment, as Javier disappeared through the studio doors and Joy finally sat back down, everyone in the building knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Do you believe Joy Behar crossed the line with her aggressive questioning? Or do you think Javier Bardem should have handled the situation differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from the world of entertainment that you won't see anywhere.